Now I would like to invite a wonderful couple here, please. David and Eva, both married. Yes. Yes.
To each other, yeah.
They will be talking about the medical residency statistics. Eva is a professor of child psychiatry at the Northwestern University in Chicago, and David is a professor of neurology, child neurology, yes, in also Northwestern University, and they're both graduates of
Jagiellonian University.
Jagiellonian University, Krakow, but they also did their research and their specialties in Mayo Clinic.
Thank you for staying with us until now. Yes, we are the Biebers. No relation. Let's just get that out of the way. All right, so long road. It's been a long morning, but a long road. We've talked about all the different steps. Dave will just briefly mention what residency training is, and then we'll focus on match day, because that is something that you will live and breathe as third, fourth year medical students.
All right, so we put a lot of time into the beginning part of this road, and we put a lot of emphasis now on the match, which is what is after medical school, basically, where you get into your subspecialty training. And residency has already mentioned, you basically live in the hospital. This is where you have your MD, you are a doctor, but you cannot practice on your own yet. And so residency is where you learn how to actually practice in the specialty that you want to do. And some of you may already know these terms, we'll just quickly go through it. We already talked a lot about medical student. Some people may have heard the term intern. This is your first year of residency. So you got your program that you wanted, and you were an intern. Basically, most states require at least 1 year of subspecialty training, even just to be a supervised trainee and order things and prescribe medications. So the intern is like the bottom of the barrel once you're out of med school. Then you continue your residency, which is a 2 to 7 more years after that, depending on what you want to do. If you're a sucker for punishment and want to keep doing training, you do fellowship after residency. And then after that, once you decide that you're done, you are an attending, which is where we are at this point.
Just a little bit about us to maybe put things in perspective. David hails from Canada. He and I met in medical school in Krakow. Dave needed an interpreter in Poland, and then he needed a green card, and so that's why we're together. Not a bad way to go, guys. We then ended up at Mayo Clinic. We matched together because you can do that if you have a couple, if you have a best friend, if you have a spouse, you can go through the match together. There's pros and cons to this. Our first choice was for me to match in my ultimate favorite program and Dave to go unmatched. And so he was my trophy husband for a year, but he also did a lot of research and academic involvement in the pediatric neurology world at Mayo and was able to match the next year. I finished 4 years of general psychiatry, and then I went on to do 2 years of child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship, and then another year of consult liaison psychiatry fellowship. Just loved being a fellow. Dave did 5 years of child neurology, which is 2 years of pediatrics and 3 of neurology. And then he went on to do 1 year of fellowship in electrophysiology. Because we do everything together, it was also very important for us to be in the same hospital, and we were fortunate enough to be together now at staff at Larry Children's.
All right, so the match is a complicated process, and we could spend a long time talking about it, but the easiest way to think about it is you're basically applying again for training. So it's very similar to what was already talked about for applying for medical school. You take all your exams, so now it's the USMLEs instead of the MCATs, and you have to get some letters of recommendation for medical school and show off all the stuff that you did in medical school, and you apply in your last year of medical school to the programs that you want to go to. And the basic way it goes is you apply, then you wait for people to send out interviews, just like medical school. You go to interviews to these programs, they feel out if they like you, if you like them, And then at the end, it's a complicated algorithm where, as an applicant, you list what you liked by specialty and location, and the programs will also list who they liked out of those that they interviewed. And then it takes about 2 weeks for a fancy computer algorithm to match everything together. It slightly favors the applicant, but basically they have to match. And that's actually just this last week we kind of mentioned it happened. We don't have statistics for it, but this last week is when it happened this year.
Essentially, it's like a dating app, right? You both have to swipe right. And that's what happens. Okay. So these are just numbers from 1952 until 2022. As you can see, the number of positions available for training increases. But what we can see is that the number of applicants has skyrocketed and is increasing at a much faster rate than the number of positions available, which makes this a very competitive process. In 2022, there were over 42,000 active applicants. Now that's important. Active applicants are those who actually submit a rank list, and we'll get into why that's important later. And they were vying for 39,000 positions.
And if you look at, I won't go through all the numbers, but the main point is 80% of people who were active applicants, 80% of them got what they wanted. Or sorry, I shouldn't say that. They got a position. And we've been talking a lot about how important the medical school choice is, and this is kind of where another reason why this is important. It's broken down here at the bottom. They don't give us all the details, but we'll go through what we can. And they don't publish like USMLE scores or like your research or any of that kind of stuff, because that's very program dependent. But if you just look at overall numbers, down here at the bottom, that's US medical seniors, 93% of them matched out of medical school. They do show the DO. We didn't talk a lot about osteopathic medicine, but if you look at the DO seniors, 91% of them matched into a position for actual like licensure training. The numbers drop when you go to international medical graduates, so it's 61% match rate, and if you're a non-US citizen, the match rate is 58%, hence why I married Eva to help me with this process.
You don't actually have to be a citizen, you have to be a permanent resident. And the reason for that is those who are coming, who are not one of those, require visa. And so then the hospital who is offering the position has to jump through several more hoops to do that. Now, large academic centers are willing to do that, some of the smaller ones may not, or vice versa. It gets a little bit tricky.
This is another point that we've kind of alluded to, which was pointed at the last presentation, as far as like if you have like a gap year. And oh no, this is the other slide. Sorry, I'll get to that. This slide is more about just a general sense of looking at DO medical schools versus overall foreign trained physicians, so international medical graduates. So there is definitely a favor to if you're trained in the US versus trained internationally.
It gets a little bit more grim because the 63% of IMGs who are US citizens who matched is maybe an overstatement, because like Dave said, when you apply, first you send out applications, you have to be invited for an interview. You can't go through the match process if you have not been given an interview. So if you look at the numbers here, even though there were 5,000 active applicants, those who submitted a rank, over 1,000 people withdrew because they did not submit a rank. That might suggest, we don't have the specific numbers, but people applied and did not get an interview. And we unfortunately know friends of ours from medical school for whom that happened. So when you do the numbers, it's a little bit more like 46%.
And this is the point, sorry, about taking a gap year. There's definitely, it's harder if you don't, or it's easier probably, going straight from medical school to residency. If you take a gap year, people will look at that and say, well, what did you do in your gap year? And research is one thing that's important. I did it, which is why I'm going to just mention this, because we chose together that we wanted to be together, and I also had a crisis of identity because I didn't like what I thought I was going to like in medical school and had to change my whole life around, but it worked out for me in the end.
Because he married a psychiatrist.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's doable, but you really got to stay proactive. In my year, Eva connected me with some people because she was in training, and they basically just meeting people is what helped, because people have to have a reason to interview you and want to have you there. And so if you get engaged and involved with people and try and work on projects, it helps. I won't say this works for everybody. The project that I worked on actually didn't get published before. It got published last year, and that was 10 years ago. But just being involved and people knowing me helped me get in on the second year. So I took a gap year, and even though the statistics dropped significantly, it is possible.
I'll also add that I'm a very average student, right? On paper, you could pretty quickly gloss me over. But what was very important for me, particularly as an IMG, is to get my foot in the door. Clinical rotations in the United States, right? Once you get to put a face to a name, even to a lower test score, but that person in front of you is willing to do the work, is willing to be a team player, and is teachable, programs will look upon that favorably. So stay relevant, get your foot through the door. This is a super busy table. It essentially outlines all the different specialties that go through the match. There's 40 plus. It also shows how many positions each specialty has and who fills them.
We just picked a few just to give you a sense, because even though it seems like a lot of you seem of the age of like looking at medical school, you have to actually kind of think about this if you're looking at IMG versus, or like studying in Poland versus here. So if you look at some of the more competitive ones, like let's say neurosurgery, if you want to go into neurosurgery, from 2022, 89% were US medical graduates who got a residency in neurosurgery to be neurosurgeons. 4% were DO. DO is quite a bit lower if you want to be a surgeon in the US, and IMG is often a little bit lower even than the DO.
On the other hand, primary care is much more open to IMGs, and so those numbers look more favorable. When we say primary care, we think about internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics. Another thing to think about if you want to consider being an IMG is to think about the location. Not all programs are IMG friendly. Some programs won't even look at applicants from an international medical school. Some do. These are just statistics by location. So if coming back to Illinois is something that's absolutely very important to you, you may want to consider that as well. That's all we have. Thank you.